Mr. President, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, in its simplest form, foreign policy is really about three things: about values, and our toolkit is mainly about two of those three things. It's about values and interests. Power, hard or soft, is usually the luxury of bigger players. The power of smaller country arises from its capacity to cooperate with others. Smart diplomacy gives smaller player at least relative influence. The UN is, of course, case in point. Big players have power through their permanent membership in the UN Security Council. But we, the smaller players, can influence the ebb and flow of international relations by being active in the corridors of diplomacy. Now, most of the speeches that we've heard here today have highlighted the fact that the world order, balance and dynamics are changing, much like they did after World War II when the UN was founded. I actually think that the post-Cold War order is over, but we don't know what the new order is going to look like. It will take at least 5 to 10 years for things to settle. And my message to this assembly today is that regardless of the size, each and every member state of the United Nations has agency, a say in how the new world order will look like. It is important that we all use this power wisely and responsibly. Now, I fully appreciate that our interests differ, depending on our geographical location, history, state of development, or culture. But fundamental values are something we should all share. We have commonly defined some of the most essential of them in the UN Charter. Today, I want to do two things. First, analyze where we are, and second, give my proposals on what we might want to do together. To understand what's currently happening in the world, I'd like to raise three different but yet related developments. First, it seems to me that there's a growing tension between multilateralism, in other words, an order based on the rule of law, and those that speak the language of multipolarity or transactionalism. So difference between multilateralism and multipolarity. Now, I can understand the temptation and the rationale of the proponents of multipolarity and transactionalism. But can they solve the world's biggest challenges, such as climate change or sustainable development? Today, I see many states, both big and small, pursuing transactional or multivectoral foreign policies. In essence, their aim is to diversify their relations with multiple actors rather than aligning with any one particular bloc. Now, this can be opportunistic, but it may also be justified and reasonable. This depends on political choices. A transactional or multivectoral foreign policy is dominated by interests. Interests drive practical choices of states, and this is entirely legitimate. This kind of foreign policy is based on a realistic understanding of power. Power defines the limits of what is possible for each state. However, values should actually underpin everything we do. Even transactional or multivectoral foreign policy should rest on a score of fundamental values. Without them, foreign policy will ultimately run into a wall. If you set aside values for unhindered pursuit of power and interests, you will eventually find before you the very same problems you wanted to overlook. Second, the balance of power in the New World Order is shifting towards the South and the East. Many countries, especially in Africa, Asia, Latin America, are becoming or have become key players in determining the direction of the New World Order. To put it simply, they have both agency and power. They are not only an expanding economic force, but their demographic growth is inexorable. This will also turn them into a political and cultural force. It will yield them both hard power and soft power, and they will use it to promote their interests as they should. The 193 members of the United Nations do not have to agree on every minute detail of values, but we have to have a common understanding of fundamentals. They include the sovereignty and territorial integrity of states. They include the prohibition of the use of force and the respect for human rights and fundamental freedoms. These values are the building blocks of who we are and what we stand for as the United Nations. The broad international community has overwhelmingly an interest to uphold them. Let me be clear. Russia has no right to continue its aggression on Ukraine. Israel has no right to violate international law in Palestine. States have no right to use Sudanese or Congolese territories to fight proxy wars for their economic or strategic self-interests. I urge us all to heed this message of the international community and act accordingly. War is always a failure of humanity. It is a collective failure of our fundamental values. It is a failure of us as human beings. Thirdly, I would like to say a few words about the state of the United Nations, the institution where we are. The UN was created to maintain and promote peace, stability, development, and friendly relations among nations. In order to achieve this, the balance between the three elements was required. The power at the highest level was represented